Every night, Max, the family dog, growled at the baby's crib until the parents discovered what he was really protecting her from. What they uncovered in that room will leave you speechless and terrified. This isn't just a dog's instinct. It's a warning, and it's far worse than they ever imagined. It was a typical evening in the Johnson household. Jane and Mark had recently welcomed their first child, a beautiful baby girl named Lily. Max, the family's loyal canine dog, had been by their side since before the baby's birth, a calm, protective companion that loved them all dearly. Max had always been a gentle giant, a trained dog with a heart as big as his paws. He'd never shown any signs of aggression, his main purpose being to protect his family. Jane and Mark trusted him completely. But something had changed since Lily came into their lives. At first, they thought it was just an adjustment period, the new baby, the unfamiliar sounds, and the different routines. But soon, it became clear that something more was going on. Every night, after they tucked Lily into her crib, Max would sit by her room, his eyes fixated on the crib, growling softly at first. It wasn't the kind of growl they were used to. This one felt deeper, more menacing, as if he were on edge about something. Jane and Mark, at first, dismissed it as protectiveness, but as the days passed, it became harder to ignore. Something was wrong, and they couldn't figure out why. As the nights went on, Max's behavior grew more troubling. It wasn't just the occasional growl anymore. Every night, without fail, he would position himself in the hallway outside Lily's room, staring at the crib with an intensity that sent chills down Jane and Mark's spines. The growls were no longer soft murmurs. They were deep, guttural, and almost warning. Sometimes, he would circle the crib, his tail rigid, his muscles tense, as though he was preparing for something to happen. But nothing ever did. She entered the nursery with calm steps, kneeling beside him. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, trying to soothe him with a gentle hand on his fur. But Max didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the crib, his growls turning to low, rumbling barks. It was as though he could see something she couldn't. His gaze shifted from Lily to the far corner of the room, and then back to the crib. Jane's heart began to race, but she couldn't bring herself to believe that something was truly wrong. Mark, hearing the commotion, came in to check. "What's going on?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Jane looked up at him, her face pale. "I think there's something wrong with Max. He won't stop growling, but I don't understand why. He's never acted like this before." Mark, though worried, tried to reassure her. "It's probably just the new baby. He's adjusting. Let's give it some time." But deep down, both of them knew something wasn't right. This was more than simple adjustment. Something, or someone, had unsettled their trusted canine. Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so she made the decision to take action. That night, while Mark was asleep, she set up a camera in the nursery, determined to capture whatever was causing Max's strange behavior. She sat in the living room, watching the small monitor screen, her eyes glued to the video feed of Lily's room. Max had always been a calm dog, but tonight, he was different. As soon as the clock struck midnight, the growling began at first. It was faint, a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. But soon, it escalated into something more intense. Max stood at the doorway, his hackles raised, his eyes locked on the crib. He paced back and forth, his growls growing louder with each passing second. Jane felt her heart race. She had expected the dog to be protective, but this was not the kind of protection she had ever seen. It was as if Max were trying to keep something at bay. But what? She rewound the footage, watching closely, and that's when she saw it. There was something moving in the corner of the room, barely noticeable, just a slight shift in the air. It was so subtle, Jane wasn't sure if she was imagining it. She leaned in closer to the screen, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The shadows in the corners seemed to flicker, moving in a way that couldn't be explained by the light alone. The growls became sharper, more insistent. Max's behavior wasn't just protectiveness, it was fear. He was afraid of something he could see, something Jane could not. The next morning, Jane shared the footage with Mark, her voice trembling. "You need to watch this," she said, and as they played the video together, the terror in her eyes matched. The fear growing in Mark's. "This isn't normal," he muttered, his face pale. They knew they had to do something. This wasn't just an issue with Max. Whatever was happening in their home was far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. That night, after reviewing the footage, Jane and Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The tension in their house had been escalating, and Max's behavior wasn't just odd, it was downright frightening. Determined to get answers, they decided to dig deeper into the history of their home. Jane began by researching the house online, scouring old archives for anything that might explain the unsettling events. After hours of searching, she came across an old newspaper article that made her blood run cold. The article detailed the tragic story of a family who had once lived in their home decades earlier. The family had lost their young daughter, Emily, under mysterious circumstances, in the very room where Lily now slept. According to the report, the child had died in her sleep, but the parents had been found in a state of complete shock, unable to explain what had happened. The article was vague, but it was enough to send a chill through Jane. Was this why Max had been acting so strangely? Had the dog somehow sensed the presence of a child that had once lived in the very room Lily now called home? Feeling a growing sense of dread, Jane shared the discovery with Mark. They both stared at the article in disbelief, unable to comprehend the connection. Could it be possible that the spirit of the child, Emily, still haunted the house? Max, as a trained canine, had always been incredibly intuitive. Perhaps he wasn't growling at Lily, but at the spirit of the little girl that once lived there. The discovery left them shaken, but it also brought a new sense of urgency. They needed to know the truth. Max's behavior was no longer just a strange quirk, it seemed to be a warning. With this chilling revelation, the parents knew they had to act quickly. That night, as the clock struck midnight, they decided to stay up, hoping to uncover more of the mystery that had unsettled their home for so long. What they would discover next would change everything. As the night deepened, Jane and Mark, now consumed by a mix of fear and curiosity, decided to call in a professional. They needed answers they couldn't find on their own. Mark reached out to a local paranormal investigator, a woman named Evelyn, who had a reputation for helping families deal with unexplained disturbances. Evelyn arrived the next day, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the house. After a brief tour of the home, she nodded thoughtfully. "This house has an energy," she said, her voice steady. "And it's not a good one." The couple exchanged a look, their stomachs sinking at her words. "There's a presence here. A child, perhaps, but it's not the kind of spirit that's here to harm. At least, not directly." Evelyn explained that canines, particularly those like Max, were often more sensitive to paranormal phenomena because of their heightened instincts. "Your dog," Evelyn continued, "he's not growling at your baby. He's protecting her from something he can sense, but you cannot. Max has been guarding her from the spirit of Emily, the little girl who died in this very room." Jane's breath caught in her throat. The investigator had confirmed their worst fear. The truth was more chilling than they could have ever imagined. Emily's spirit had never left. It lingered in the room, restless, bound by the trauma of her untimely death. Max's growls weren't just outbursts of jealousy or confusion. They were warnings, fierce protectiveness directed at the unseen threat that Max had sensed from the very beginning. Evelyn offered a solution, a cleansing ritual to help the spirit move on. Jane and Mark were hesitant but desperate. If this could bring peace to their home and protect their baby, they had to try. They agreed, not fully understanding what would happen, but knowing it was the only way to end the nightmare. That night, they would take the first step toward ending the terror that had gripped their home. Evelyn, the paranormal investigator, prepared her tools, lighting candles and chanting softly in the nursery. Max sat by Lily's crib, his eyes locked on the corner of the room, his growls barely audible now, but still present, as if guarding them from the unseen. Jane and Mark stood in the doorway, unsure of what to expect, but hoping for peace.